We are live with Ayesha and Albie, and Conservative commentator Tim Montgomerie is here now too. Now, we've been asking you, who do you blame for the Tories party's worst ever election performance? Get in touch. 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need. After 14 years in power, the Conservatives have fallen to just 120 seats so far. That's a loss of 250 from Boris Johnson's landslide victory in 2019. And some major figures were given the chop by voters, including a record 12 cabinet ministers. Let's have a little look at who is gone. So Liz Truss, former Prime Minister, gone. Jacob Rees-Mogg, former Commons and Brexit minister, also gone. Grant Shapps, Defence Secretary, is no longer there. Penny Mordaunt, Commons leader, also gone. Gillian Keegan, Education Secretary. And then we move on to our back row. Therese Coffey, former Environment Secretary, also gone. Michael Fabricant, a veteran MP, no longer with us. Johnny Mercer, Veterans Minister, also lost his seat. Sir Robert Buckland, former Lord Chancellor, Justice Secretary, lost his seat. Liam Fox, long-standing MP for the Conservatives, lost his seat. Simon Hart, the Chief Whip. Lucy Fraser, Culture Secretary. Alex Chalk as well, Justice Secretary. Mark Harper has been doing the rounds during the campaign, Transport Secretary, losing his seat. Steve Baker, Northern Ireland Minister, Brexit hard man Steve Baker, also gone. Victoria Prentice as well, Attorney General, losing her seat. And lots more as well. Tim, let me come to you.
Can I have a hug, please?
You can have a hug, Tim. How do you feel?
Well, look, Albie's going to be cross with me, I think, with what I say now, because it is a devastating defeat and the Tories deserved to lose because we hadn't governed well, we hadn't behaved well. But I was expecting much worse.
Oh, this is copium, Tim.
And the thing is, we almost faced an extinction-level event. Some of the polls before polling suppose closed did suggest that we could be down to actually below the Liberal Democrats. We aren't at that extinction level event, and so Albie will have to forgive me. The Conservative Party is still in contention, and because the other side of the story, and this is where I'm going to now annoy Ayesha, is some of the latest sort of opinion polling numbers say that Labour is only on about 34%. They've only got 34% of the vote yesterday. That isn't a big enthusiastic vote from the country for Labour. So I think this morning we got a hiding, we deserve the hiding, but I don't think we're out of the race for the next general election. The Conservative Party still matters, and I wasn't sure that would have been the case 24 hours ago.
OK, well, look, we're asking the question, who do you blame for the results of the Tory party, the worst results in modern history? Let's take a quick call. Rosie in Essex. Good morning, Rosie. Who do you think is to blame?
Good morning. Personally, I think it's the MPs on the Conservative side. They gave us Liz Truss, didn't know the woman from Adam, absolutely abysmal. She was there 6 weeks, completely lost trust in what they were doing when that happened. She then walks away, still gets a pension, I assume, as a Prime Minister. Doesn't make sense. Also, we had, at the end of the day, our Prime Minister Sunak, he gave out furlough when he was Chancellor. What a fantastic thing. And I can't believe that people thought they were going to get that money and we wouldn't have to repay it. So that doesn't make sense to me because, of course, it was going to be hard. If you're giving out so much money in furlough, we had to try and, the country would have to try and get that money back into the coffers. But I think also the other thing is when it comes to illegal immigrants, the fact that 80 years ago we had D-Day, now we can't even stop a dinghy. It doesn't make sense.
OK,
so
Rosie,
me,
Rosie, let me pause you there because I want to get Albie's thoughts. Rosie saying the MPs are to blame. What do you make of that?
I do think the MPs are to blame. It was quite clear during the 2022 leadership contest who the membership wanted in the final two. It was Penny Mordaunt, who is there on the placard that we can see, and Kemi Badenoch, who has, thank God, kept her seat. It was not Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. And I said at the time, I was furious with the MPs for thinking they knew best, and then they gave us these two absolutely awful candidates, one of whom, thank God, has lost their seat, Liz Truss, and the other, Rishi Sunak, who has just lost us this election.
So you've been very clear with your thoughts about Rishi Sunak. Tim, I haven't got your thoughts on who do you think is responsible for this big landslide? If you could pin it on someone, maybe that's a bit unfair, but who would you?
I think it's unfair and it would be wrong, actually, because I think one thing the Conservative Party mustn't now do is, like, the tendency is, if you're a Boris fan, you're going to say it all went wrong because we got rid of Boris. If you're a Truss supporter, you'll say, well, Liz Truss blamed everyone apart from herself, didn't she? And I agree with Albie, deserved to lose. Rishi Sunak could say it wasn't my fault, even though he probably ran the worst campaign I can remember in a general election. You can sort of blame it on his inheritance. The fact is that almost everyone inside the Conservative Party, including commentators like me, we've all got to look at ourselves and understand why we descended so far, so comprehensively. We went from an extraordinary victory in 2019, where we made massive inroads into Labour territory, to lose all of that. And we all have to examine ourselves. And I think the challenge for the Conservatives going to go forward is every time you have a cabinet minister, former cabinet minister in front of them, and say, don't just tell me what other people did wrong, tell me what you were responsible. We've all got to learn some deep lessons.
Ayesha, if you can ask you to momentarily take your Labour hat off for a second, where do you think it went all wrong for the Conservatives? Was it the calling of a very early general election? Had he called it a little bit later? Do you think it would have made a difference?
I think, to be honest, the country is just fed up of everything that has accumulated over 14 years. You've had austerity, which we're really seeing the results of now in terms of police being hollowed out, communities being hollowed out, things that probably don't mean much when you see them on a spreadsheet, but make a big difference to the fabric of people's communities. Then we had all the turmoil over Brexit, and whatever you think of Brexit, we can all agree it's not been this huge roaring success that we were promised. Then you had Boris Johnson, the lying, the Partygate, the kind of dragging politics into disrepute. Then with COVID, you had all the COVID corruption stuff when people were like really struggling, and then people were like filling their boots and all the cronyism. Then you had the madness of Liz Truss, and I did some focus groups in those blue wall areas where actually it was older Conservative women who were saying in these focus groups, I cannot believe I'm a lifelong Conservative voter. For us, financial security, our mortgages are sacrosanct. And the idea that our mortgages, my child's ability to get on the housing ladder is now ruined because of they could not believe that. And I think it's a culmination of all of that. And then you end with Rishi Sunak, who I think is a decent person. I think he is hardworking, decent. He's just very, very bad at politics.
All right, Tim, did you want to come back on that?
Well, actually, funnily enough, I agree with a lot of what Ayesha said, and I'm not going to defend a lot of what the Conservative Party's done. I'm really not. But one thing I would say, and I think this is something we all should take a step back from, we can be very parochial and we can just think this is a British phenomenon. Look at what's happening in France this weekend. We could see a far-right party win most seats in their National Assembly. I've only got to mention Biden-Trump to talk about the dysfunctionality in American politics. The far-right in Germany came second in the recent European elections. There's something happening in Western democracies. All the mainstream parties are basically going wrong. They don't survive in office for very long. There's something because of the demography, the ageing population, the debts they're requiring. We have to ask ourselves some very broad and deep questions about why all the main democracies are going wrong. If we just think Conservative Party's out, bring a new government in, if there's not fundamental change, and that's why I worry about Labour, because I don't think they've offered fundamental change. They're tweaking. They've been cautious. And Western democracies need something very different than they've had for a long time.
I think on that, it's just day one. Rishi Sunak hasn't even resigned yet. No one's been to see the King in the Palace. Let's see what Keir Starmer does.
Yeah, we had the manifesto. The manifesto wasn't the bold
Hang on
thing.
a minute. The Conservatives had stuff in their manifesto that
I'm not defending the Tories. I'm asking you to be a bit more critical of your party.
I have been very critical of my party for many, many years, and we spent 14 years in the wilderness. But today, in this moment, I'm actually praising my party because what Keir Starmer has done is he's performed a political miracle to get a defeated, shattered party.
Threw it away.
But the one thing I will say, no, luck in politics is years of hard work and preparation, meeting a moment of opportunity and turning that to political advantage.
I'm going to pause you there because I want to see what people are saying at home, because I want to get their thoughts on who they think is to blame for this crushing defeat for the Conservatives. Let's speak to Yvonne, who got in touch from Essex. Yvonne, good morning. Who do you think is to blame?
Good morning. Originally from Brighton and Hove originally, and they've gone. Now, it's a legacy, and when it went down to Liz Truss,
Right.
that was a ghastly. And then, so it's not Rishi's fault, all of this. It's a legacy right back when the Tories were shooting themselves in the foot over and over again. Right
Okay.
way back. And they didn't do all they promised they would do.
How far back are you going to go? David Cameron?
Well, yes, to put Brexit up at such notice without any information on what it's all going to be about. It was all very sudden, and that started the rot, really, because when we went with that, the promises weren't fulfilled for that either. So,
Okay. All right.
It was a knock-on effect.
Okay, a knock-on effect, a legacy. Yvonne, thank you for that. Let's get another point of view. Tim in Merseyside. Tim, who do you think is to blame for the Conservatives' crushing defeat? Oh, I beg your pardon, Derek. We're going to go to Derek in Northamptonshire. Derek, good morning.
Oh, good morning, everybody.
Hi. Who do you think is to blame?
Well, I don't think there's anything to do with anyone in this country.
Okay.
It happened in Russia. The leader there, as we all know, invaded Ukraine.
Right.
And that led to a dramatic increase of energy costs. Energy costs resulted in much higher costs for goods and services, much more inflation. Our government tried to cushion us from that by, as is well known, giving us help with energy bills. People don't seem to consider that of great importance now. But,
Okay, but
still, nonetheless, they think that the government is responsible. But
Okay,
in fact, it happened in Russia.
So you think the Conservatives had no hand in this downfall? It was all things that happened to them?
I wouldn't say that. But they attempted in various ways to try and deal with situations which were happening elsewhere, but they've tried and perhaps not always been entirely successful, but I don't think they should be blamed for trying.
Okay, all right, Derek, thank you. I'm only moving on to squeeze in as many views as we can. Let's go to Tim in Merseyside. Tim, good morning. Who do you think is to blame?
Hello there. I'd say, well, Rishi is to blame, really, isn't he? He's massively rich, and how can anyone relate to him?
Hang on, what's that got to do with it? What difference does it make that he's wealthy?
Well, on the other hand, I would say that I think there should be proportional representation in elections in this country because I cast my vote. It counts for nothing.
Right.
It counts for nothing at all. My vote is obliterated.
Okay.
I think my vote should count for something nationally.
Okay, all right, Tim, I'm sure that's going to come up later because we're going to be talking about the reform. I mean, I'm not sure whether that would have made any difference to the Conservative Party's fortunes or whether we had a different voting system.
Well, look, there's faults and strengths in all electoral systems. The one thing, first past the post has been pretty tough to my party in this election. But it's
been very good for your party in previous elections.
But the reason I support it most is when the country moves, when the country wants a change in government, first past the post delivers it in style. Yeah. The Social Democrats in Germany have kept in power almost whatever the country's voted for years and years. They haven't been punished in the way, that first past the post. With Liz Truss, the British people aren't stupid. They know how to vote tactically when they want to. Yeah. They wanted to get rid of Liz Truss, and they were able to do it with first past the post. If it had been a proportional representation system, she'd probably been on a party list. She'd been near the top because of the way that someone of her seniority would achieve, and she'd still be in power today. There's a good case for first past the post.
Very difficult to get rid of individual MPs in proportional representation. Peter in Manchester. Peter, who do you think is to blame for the Tories' result?
Hi, I blame just two people, Boris and Liz.
Boris and Liz?
Yeah, absolutely. They completely decimated the Tory vote. I think that they lost the complete confidence of the public, and that's who you should blame for losing this vote.
OK, Peter, thank you. Albie, what do you think of that? We spoke about Liz Truss. We've got your thoughts on that. But what about Boris Johnson? How much of a hand does he have in the Conservatives' worst result in modern history?
Quite a big one, actually, I think. If we look at the main issue on the right today, it is undoubtedly immigration. Who was the Prime Minister and who was the Home Secretary under which we saw the largest increase in immigration ever? Boris Johnson and Priti Patel. And this idea from right-wing Tory MPs that Boris Johnson was this huge Thatcherite Conservative, I think this is one of the biggest states we've ever seen. So the undoing of the Conservative Party undoubtedly came from Boris Johnson's government, also his incompetence and his moral failures, if you will. Then Liz Truss put that on steroids with her awful mini-budget. But I do think Rishi's got a part to blame in this as well, because the election campaign that he ran, as Tim mentioned earlier on, the worst in living memory, just awful. I supported Rishi in 2022. I thought he was going to be much better than this. He's ultimately ended up being terrible. So I think all three of the last three Prime Ministers we've had since 2019 are to blame.
All right, just before we go, Tim, before you leave us, what happens next for the Conservatives? Who do you see as taking up the reins to become the new leader for the Conservatives?
Well, I'm not trying to dodge the question, because for me it is Tom Tugendhat. But I think we shouldn't rush into sort of a messiah complex where we think it's all about choosing a leader. We have profound problems in our organisation. Membership is declining. We need to rethink our policy structure. We need to reconnect with civil society. We don't have the links in the professions, in the universities. We need to profoundly re-examine almost every aspect of how we're organised and how we're structured. And just rushing to think that there's someone out there, some MP, who's going to transform our position, that's wrong. We need a deep and long search before we go choose a leader too quickly.
And just a quick thought on reform. Is there a collaboration to be had with reform, or should the Conservatives stay clear of the Reform Party? They've got 4 MPs, they're going to be joining them on those benches.
Well, we certainly need to reunite the right. One of the reasons why the Conservative Party has dominated British politics in the post-war period, holding office for 2/3 of that time, is because the left is traditionally divided and the right united. I'm not sure we need to unite with Reform MPs, but certainly with Reform voters. We need to welcome them back into the fold as much as we can.
OK, Tim, thank you. Good to see you.